And for more on the story, I'm joined on the line by Presidential Spokesperson Mac Maharaj. Mr. Maharaj, good evening. Just to clear things up, there seemed to have been some confusion earlier on about exactly which sections the President was taking issue with. To be clear, it is 42 and 45 of the Protection of Information Bill.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, ma'am, to clarify matters. Yes, there seems to have been some confusion. The President was explicit. He said he had referred the bill back to the National Assembly for reconsideration insofar as sections of the bill, in particular sections 42 and 45, lack meaning and coherence and consequently are irrational and accordingly unconstitutional. So let me just clarify that he referred to these two clauses as particular instances of that incoherence.
All right, I'll highlight the first one, Mr. Maharaj. It's any person who fails to comply with Section 15, guilty of an offence, liable to fine or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 5 years. But I want to focus on 45. This bill, as you know, is still an item of grave concern for journalists and society in general. And there was perceived hope when this particular section, 45, was amended and by consequence prevented officials from abusing their office by willy-nilly suppressing information that could expose them by holding a jail term over them. What is the President's reason, Mr. Maharaj, for highlighting this particular section?
The President cited this particular section that it is not coherent and consequently irrational and therefore accordingly unconstitutional. He says that the Assembly should look at its coherence, refer to other sections of it, and re-look at it in that context.
By an easy reading, though, Mr. Maharaj, and I will admit that I'm not a legal practitioner, and by the team's reading of it, and particularly because this section was fought for and amended and therefore presented in its current state, there is some consternation, again, that perhaps the President wasn't being clear enough on exactly what he means.
No. The question of the President's view that this is unconstitutional now goes back to the Assembly to reconsider. The President is not saying, this is how you must state it, this is what you must state. He has made it clear in his statement that the purpose of this bill has a legitimate one to protect certain information, both from private persons, companies, and state information. The question of the way it has been drafted causes a problem, and he has sent it back to Parliament on those grounds. I am not in a position to go into the details of it and actually begin to redraft things for Parliament. That is a job that Parliament will have to attend to.
Mr. Maharaj, is there scope here for the National Assembly, and this is certainly the hope from us in the media, that the National Assembly can now look at areas that were not highlighted by the President, which have been protested by ourselves and members of society?
From my point of perspective of the Presidency, he has cited these two clauses as a particular examples of the incoherence. It is open to Parliament to look at the coherence of the entire bill, to look at its rationality, and to look at its constitutionality.
Right. So there are no boundaries there. Final question, Mr. Maharaj. A simplistic interpretation is that this is a cynical attempt by the President to park this bill until after the elections in the context of this vehement criticism that it has drawn not only for the bill but for the President as well.
It's a type of cynical statements that are made during the era of party politicking with elections in mind. Remember one thing. Governance, the work of Parliament, of the Executive and the Judiciary does not stop because elections are coming. They have to continue to make laws, and they have to make laws properly and make sure that those laws are within the confines of the Constitution. And this bill has been before Parliament for some time. The President has studied it, received representations. He is not saying the representation from A is right and the representation from B is wrong. Okay. He's saying, informed by all those views, I have come to the conclusion that it does not pass the constitutional test. And I think it is cynical to dismiss that as pure avoiding election issues.
We appreciate your time, Mr. Maharaj. Thank you, Presidential Spokesperson Mac Maharaj.
News that moves. eNCA.com.